The heart monitor beeped faster than I'd ever heard before. My wife's voice, weak, trembling, echoed through the hospital room. Where's my husband? She was 7 months pregnant. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It was supposed to be a calm checkup, not flashing lights, not nurses yelling, "We need a doctor in here." But then, in the middle of all that chaos, she saw her, standing in the corner of the ER room, phone in hand, expression cold as ice, Karen, our HOA president, the woman who had made our lives miserable for months. She wasn't family. She wasn't a friend. She wasn't even invited. But she stood there, taking pictures of my wife, of the bed, of the monitors. And when a nurse asked her to leave, she said, "I'm part of their homeowners association. I have a right to document everything." My wife screamed, "Get her out." And that's when security dragged Karen out of the ER. By the time I ran back in, my wife was crying, shaking, terrified. I looked at the nurses, and one of them said, quietly, she claimed she was family. We believed her until she started recording. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Because how do you protect someone from that kind of obsession? Karen wasn't just crossing boundaries, she was breaking every rule of human decency. And what she didn't know was that my father, a federal judge, was about to make sure the whole world saw what she did. Live, in open court. Before I tell you the full story, I want to know, if you were in that hospital room, what would you have done? Would you confront her? Call security? Tell me in the comments, and let me know what city or state you're watching from. Because this one isn't just about an HOA gone too far. It's about justice and how far a father will go to protect his family. 6 months before that night in the hospital, everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Oak Haven was the kind of neighborhood you'd see in real estate magazines, manicured lawns, matching mailboxes, and driveways lined with spotless SUVs. My wife, Rachel, was 6 months pregnant when we moved in. She loved it immediately. "It feels safe here," she said, smiling as she ran her hand over her belly. And it did, at least on the surface, until we met her. Karen, HOA president, self-proclaimed guardian of community standards, and apparently the unofficial sheriff of Oak Haven. She introduced herself before we'd even unpacked, walked right up our driveway, clipboard in hand, pastel cardigan buttoned too tight. "Welcome," she said, smiling in that practiced, artificial way. "I'm Karen, head of the HOA. We take pride in keeping Oak Haven orderly." Her eyes flicked to the moving truck behind me, then to the potted plants Rachel was setting near the porch. "Those aren't approved species," she said. "But don't worry, I'll send you the acceptable landscaping list." Rachel laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Over the next few days, Karen made her presence known. Notes on the door, emails about driveway violations. One message even said, "Please ensure your outdoor lighting complies with HOA color temperature guidelines. Blue-tinted bulbs are not permitted." We tried to ignore it. New place, new rules, right? But Karen didn't like being ignored. Every morning, she'd walk her little dog past our house, slow down, and take pictures of our lawn, our cars, even our recycling bins. One afternoon, Rachel waved at her from the porch. Karen didn't wave back. She just said, "You should probably move those planters before the weekend inspection." That night, Rachel sighed and said, "She's intense, but maybe she's just doing her job." I wanted to believe that. Then came the baby shower. Rachel had spent weeks planning it, pastel balloons, tiny cupcakes, a big "It's a girl" banner on our fence. Family and neighbors came by, laughing, celebrating. For a moment, it felt like we finally belonged here. Until Karen showed up. No invitation, no smile. She stood by the gate with her phone raised. "Just documenting the decorations," she said flatly. "HOA policy prohibits outdoor signage exceeding 3 feet in height." I stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "It's a baby shower, Karen." She didn't flinch. Rules are rules. If we start letting people break them, we lose order. Rachel's face fell. Guests went quiet. I took a breath and said through my teeth, "Take your photos and go." She did. And 30 minutes later, while everyone was still inside opening gifts, I got an email notification. Subject: Violation notice, unauthorized decorations fine, $200, that was the first fine. There would be 5 more in the weeks that followed. Trash can left out too long. Mailbox, paint not HOA approved beige. Car, parked at improper angle. It felt less like a neighborhood and more like a prison with perfectly trimmed grass. Rachel tried to stay positive, but I could see the stress in her face. She'd rub her belly, whispering, "It's okay, baby. Mommy's fine." But she wasn't. The night she started having early contractions, I caught her scrolling through her phone, deleting photos of the house. "I just don't want her finding anything else to complain about," she said. That's when I realized this wasn't just an HOA issue. This was harassment. I called Karen that night. She answered on the first ring. "Karen, this stops now," I said. "You don't come near my house again." Her voice stayed cold. "If your wife can't handle the rules, maybe this community isn't for you." I hung up. My hands were shaking. Rachel told me not to make it worse. But I already knew. People like Karen don't stop when you're quiet. They stop when someone makes them. I just didn't know yet how far she was willing to go. From that night on, everything in Oak Haven changed. Karen's smile disappeared completely. No more fake pleasantries. No more polite tones. Now it was control, pure and constant. It started small, like always. Notes tucked under our doormat. Reminder, lawn edges must be trimmed weekly. Then violation, garden decor exceeds height restriction. But within weeks, it became personal. One afternoon, Rachel came home in tears. She'd been sitting outside, rubbing her swollen belly, when Karen approached. "Pregnancy is no excuse for clutter," she'd said, pointing to the baby stroller box still near our porch. "This is a community, not a storage unit." Rachel had tried to laugh it off, but I could see it was eating her alive. She didn't sleep well anymore. She jumped every time the doorbell rang. I started documenting everything, every letter, every email, every photo Karen took of her home. Something in me knew this wouldn't just fade away. Then came the security camera incident. Late one night, I checked my doorbell footage and saw a figure standing at the edge of our property, flashlight in hand, phone camera raised. It was Karen. 2:13 a.m. I saved the clip immediately. When I confronted her the next day, she didn't deny it. She just said, "HOA presidents have the right to verify compliance at any time." I replied, "At 2 in the morning?" She smiled that smile again and said, "Some of us take our duties seriously." Rachel begged me to let it go. "Please," she said, "we can't fight her. She'll just make it worse." But she was already making it worse. 2 days later, I came home to find Rachel sitting on the couch, pale and shaking. "What happened?" I asked. She handed me her phone. It was a group email sent by Karen to every resident in the neighborhood. Friendly reminder: residents should maintain cleanliness and appropriate appearances during pregnancy-related events or gatherings. We are a community that values decorum. She had attached a photo of Rachel sitting on our porch, barefoot, holding her belly. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. She took this. Rachel nodded, crying. I didn't even see her. That was it for me. I called my father that night, not as a judge, but as a dad. He listened quietly, then said, "Document everything. Don't threaten her. Let her bury herself with her own actions." So I did, but I didn't expect how fast it would spiral. A week later, Rachel's doctor said her blood pressure was dangerously high. "Too much stress," he warned. "She needs complete rest." I took time off work. We stayed home, curtains drawn, phone silent, but still, she found ways to reach us. Karen left another violation notice, this time for failure to maintain front property visibility. We'd drawn the curtains. That apparently was now an issue. And then the day everything changed. It was a Wednesday morning. Rachel woke up feeling dizzy. She said something felt off, not pain, but a heaviness, a pressure. I called the doctor. He said, "Get her to the ER now." We packed her overnight bag, got into the car, and left in a rush. And somehow, Karen saw us leave. We didn't know it then, but while we were speeding toward the hospital, she was already calling around, asking neighbors if we were moving, asking if anyone knew which hospital we'd gone to. By the time we checked into the ER, I was signing papers at the reception desk while Rachel was being wheeled away. She looked scared, and I promised, I'll be right there. It was maybe 10 minutes, 15 at most, but that's all it took. Because when I walked back into that hospital room, I saw the look on my wife's face, pale, terrified, tears streaming down her cheeks. The sound of machines filled the room, that steady beeping that was supposed to mean safety, life, control. But in that moment, everything felt out of control. When I heard Rachel whisper, Karen, my stomach dropped. I thought I'd misheard her. Maybe the pain or fear had made her confused. But then a nurse turned toward me and said quietly, Sir, security already escorted her out. Who? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. The nurse looked uneasy. A woman claiming to be family. She said she was part of your household association. Household association. HOA. My heart pounded in my chest. She was here? In this room? The nurse nodded slowly. She walked in while your wife was being prepped for tests. She said she needed to inspect the safety conditions. She started recording with her phone. I looked at Rachel. Her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. She was standing right here, she whispered, pointing to the foot of the bed. She was filming and smiling, like she was proving something. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to scream, to run after her, to grab that phone and delete every trace of what she'd done. But Rachel needed me more. So I held her hand and said the only thing that made sense, it's over. She's gone now. But I knew it wasn't over. Not even close. 30 minutes later, hospital security brought me into a small office. The chief of security pulled up footage from the ER hallway cameras. And there she was, Karen, wearing her pastel cardigan, her HOA badge hanging around her neck like it meant something. She walked straight through the emergency doors, flashing that badge at the front desk. She lied. She told the receptionist she was family emergency contact for the patient. The video showed her walking right into my wife's room, phone out, recording. When the nurse told her to stop, she said, "This is public property. I have every right." My fists clenched. The chief said, quietly, "We've already reported the incident to the police. She left before officers arrived, but we have her plate number." I nodded. "Thank you." Then I called my father. He didn't say much, just send me the footage. Rachel stayed in the hospital overnight. Thankfully, the baby was safe, but she barely spoke. Every time a nurse came in, she flinched. That night, she whispered, "Why would she do that?" And I said, "Because people like her think power gives them permission." Rachel nodded slowly, tears running down her face. "I just want her gone. I just want peace." I promised her she'd get it. 2 days later, there was a knock at our door. It wasn't Karen. It was the police serving her with a restraining order. She'd been charged with trespassing, harassment, and invasion of privacy. When she was confronted, she claimed it was a misunderstanding. She told the officer, "I was just checking on her well-being. I'm the HOA president. That's part of my duty." But the footage told a different story. And that footage was now in the hands of a man who'd spent his entire career upholding justice, my father. A week later, my dad called. His voice was calm, the way it always was when something serious was about to happen. He said, "There's going to be a hearing. She'll have to answer for what she did." I thought that would be the end, a quiet court day, a few witnesses, maybe a fine. But my father had other plans. He told the prosecutor to play every second of that hospital footage on the courtroom screen. Every single second. On the day of the hearing, the courtroom was full. Neighbors, reporters, even HOA board members came to watch. Karen walked in, still wearing that same cardigan, chin up, like she was the victim. But when the footage started playing, the moment she flashed that fake badge, the moment she stepped into my wife's hospital room, the entire courtroom went silent. The only sounds were the beeping of the heart monitor in the video and her voice saying, "This is public property. I have every right." The judge paused the video. "Ms. Brown," he said, voice calm, but sharp enough to cut through the air, Do you still claim this was an act of concern? Karen shifted in her seat. I I was checking for safety violations. I thought. He raised a hand to stop her. You thought you could use your HOA authority to violate a woman's medical privacy during an emergency? She stammered. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, he said. And now everyone in this courtroom has seen it. The silence that followed was heavier than any sentence. When the video ended, my wife squeezed my hand. She was crying, not from pain this time, but from relief. The video ended, and for a few seconds no one breathed. Even the air in the courtroom felt heavy, thick with disbelief and disgust. Karen sat frozen, her eyes darting from the screen to the judge, then to the rows of people watching. You could feel her pride cracking, like a porcelain mask splintering under pressure. The judge leaned forward slightly, folding his hands. "Ms. Brown," he said, voice low and deliberate, "I've seen a lot in my years on the bench. Fraud, theft, abuse of power. But rarely does someone walk into a hospital and turn another person's suffering into a performance." Karen swallowed hard, lips trembling. I was trying to help." He cut her off with a small shake of his head. "Help? You trespassed into a restricted medical area. You impersonated a family contact. You violated a woman's privacy while she was in distress, and then you recorded it. That's not help. That's humiliation." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge continued, his tone never rising, but somehow becoming even heavier. "You used authority you never had, an HOA badge to feed an obsession with control. You thought rules made you powerful, but real power comes from decency, and you've shown none." Karen's attorney shifted uncomfortably. She stared down at the table, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The judge looked at the prosecutor. "Play the last clip." The screen flickered. One final image. Karen being escorted out of the hospital room, her face twisted in defiance, phone still clutched in her hand. Behind her, my wife lay trembling, monitors beeping. When it stopped, the judge took off his glasses, folded them, and said quietly, "Let that image stay with you, Ms. Brown. That's what your rules did." He ruled swiftly. Karen was fined heavily, not just for trespassing, but for intentional infliction of emotional distress. The court granted a permanent restraining order protecting Rachel and our family. The HOA board removed her immediately. But the most powerful moment wasn't the punishment. It was what happened right after. As we left the courtroom, a woman approached us. She was one of our neighbors, someone who had always kept her head down during Karen's reign. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she said, "I saw what she did to you. I'm so sorry we didn't stop her sooner." I nodded. "You don't have to be sorry. You just have to speak up next time." Behind us, Karen sat alone at the defense table. No lawyer beside her now. No clipboard. No power. Just silence. When we stepped outside, reporters surrounded us, asking questions. "Do you think justice was served? How is your wife? What would you say to others dealing with abusive HOAs?" I didn't give a speech. I just said, this wasn't about rules. It was about respect. The moment we stop respecting each other, no rulebook can save us. My father, the judge, didn't comment publicly. But that night, at home, he said something I'll never forget. He poured himself a cup of coffee, looked at me across the table, and said, "Sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it just shows the truth and lets the world decide." That's exactly what he'd done. The following week, the HOA sent an official apology letter, not just to us, but to the entire neighborhood. They rewrote their bylaws. They banned overnight inspections. They created a code of conduct for board members. And just like that, the place that once felt like a prison started to feel like a home again. Rachel began sleeping through the night. She laughed more. She started walking in the mornings again, holding her belly with both hands, smiling at the neighbors who now waved warmly. Karen sold her house 2 months later. Rumor had it she moved to another state. No one missed her. But sometimes when the wind blew through the trees at night and I saw porch lights flicker across the street, I still thought about her and how close we came to breaking. Then I'd look at Rachel, peaceful, her hand resting on the life growing inside her, and I'd remember why we fought. Because some battles aren't about revenge, they're about reclaiming peace. It's strange how silence feels different when peace finally returns. For weeks after the court case, the house just breathed again. No more notes taped to the door. No more late-night flashlights in the yard. Just quiet, the kind that lets you hear yourself think. Rachel's smile came back slowly, like the sunrise after a storm. Every morning, she'd sit on the porch with her tea, rubbing her belly and humming softly. Sometimes neighbors stopped to chat, people who once crossed the street to avoid Karen's wrath. They brought flowers, cookies, stories. One woman said, "I didn't realize how much fear she created until she was gone." And Rachel, gentle as ever, just said, "We all learn at our own pace." Then came the day everything changed again, but this time for the better. It was 3:47 a.m. when Rachel woke me whispering, "It's time." The drive to the hospital felt eerily familiar, but this time there was no fear, just anticipation. Every light seemed to turn green for us. Hours later, I held our daughter for the first time. Tiny fingers, tiny breaths, a quiet strength in her little heartbeat. Rachel smiled through tears. "She's safe." And I whispered back, "Because you are." When my father came to visit, he stood beside the crib, hands folded, eyes soft, that same man who once commanded a courtroom now looking at his granddaughter like she was the purest verdict life could give. He said, "She'll grow up in a world that knows the difference between power and kindness." And I knew he was right. Months passed. Seasons changed. I started fixing up the backyard, planting new trees where the old HOA inspection camera once stood. Rachel painted the nursery walls with little clouds and gold stars. We laughed again. We lived again. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes, I found the last HOA notice Karen had ever sent us, the one about front property visibility. I read it once more and then tossed it into the fire pit. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. Rachel watched and smiled. "Closure," she said. "Exactly." And you know what's funny? People started reaching out online. Neighbors from other towns, even other states. They'd seen the court records, read the news articles, and written messages like, "This happened to us too. Thank you for standing up. You gave us courage." That's when it hit me. Our story wasn't just ours anymore. It was a reminder that standing up to people who abuse their small power, no matter how official they sound, matters. Because silence protects the wrong people. So now, when I look out at my peaceful little street, kids riding bikes, neighbors chatting by mailboxes, I smile knowing we didn't just one case. We changed a community. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there, another Karen thinks twice before crossing that line again.